Hey, it's Robonzo. Welcome to another episode of the Unstarving Musician Podcast. The best way to support this podcast is to join the Unstarving Musician community. It's easy to do. Just go to unstarvingmusician.com and join right there on the homepage. If you're an independent musician, you'll be glad you joined because I share expertise and lessons you can use in your music journey. And this isn't all just coming from me and my years as a gigging musician, but also coming from hundreds of other musicians I've talked to as part of the Unstarving Musician Project, including those I've interviewed on this podcast. And that's all for free, just for being part of the Unstarving Musician community. Being part of the community also allows me to inform you of new episodes and special offers that are exclusive to the Unstarving Musician community. This is all 100% intended to serve you and other independent musicians. In the process, this community will become sustainable, able to serve more and more independent music artists. Okay, on with the show. Wendy Colonna is my guest for this episode. She is a longtime career music artist. She's a songwriter, performer, recording artist, yogi, and mom. She's also co-creator of Tips Concerts, one of the best-known house concert series in Austin, perhaps one of the best-known in the great state of Texas. It was a bit of a surprise to Wendy to hear me refer to Tips Concerts as a marquee brand among house concerts. She was surprised but happy, of course. We talk about the creation of Tips Concerts and her sustainable career. Wendy also discusses the collaborative spirit of the Austin music scene, and a particularly insightful part of our chat is around Wendy's evolving life coaching practice. We also talk about common misconceptions among music students about what success looks like. She's had opportunities to speak to music students at UT Texas. She has found a lot of inspiration in writing for advertising, and that perhaps led us to the big takeaway for the episode, which is you never know where your hard work and relationships will intersect with opportunity. All right, let's do this. This is the Unstarving Musicians Podcast. I'm your host, Robonzo. This podcast features conversations with me and indie music artists. Conversations intended to help other indie musicians be better at marketing, business, the creative process, and all the other things that empower us to do more of what we love. Make music. We're just going to roll. Sort of a bit of a personal question. Is Mark Addison your partner?
No.
Husband? Okay. Someone else. Okay.
Yeah, he's my writing and recording partner, or has been for a couple of different records, and we do a lot of advertising work together.
Oh, cool.
And we are partners in our house concert series, Tips Concerts. But no, we're buddies. And I put that little camper for Tips concerts on his property, and we were planning on working on another record together. So we've been friends a long time.
Cool. Yeah, I didn't know, but I saw the obvious connection. I thought, I guess they're a couple married or something. But kind of you are a couple, but you're like work. What do you call it? What do they call it? Work spouses or?
Oh yeah. But we used to call it that whenever I lived on the property. And yeah, we did. It was fun. He's great. He's a great friend. And, but no, I'm actually married to someone else, and he's a partner as well. And he splits his time between Cleveland and Austin. His partner lives in Cleveland. So they swap back and forth. So yeah.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. Mark and Tips Concerts has been a bit of a recurring theme on the podcast tonight. I want to say that it first came up when I had Ray Prim. He's been a performer there, yes? Do you recall?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was on the podcast.
That's so funny that our series has come onto your radar.
Oh, yeah. And believe me, if I had the bandwidth, I would have been pinging you and Mark, to say, hey, you got mentioned again on the podcast.
That's great.
Yeah, so I think Ray was the first one to bring it up. And interestingly, too, it was in that same conversation that the whole house concert thing became an interest of mine. And it has been largely, or I was going to say sheerly, but largely because of conversations I've had on the podcast, and knowing that there are surely artists that I talk to that are interested in learning more about that world. So it's just been kind of recurring. And then I know it's come up a couple of other times on the podcast, but most recently, Jana Pokop had brought up, hopefully I'm remembering all this correctly, had brought up Mark, because they worked together recently on a project of hers. So, and then, so it was Ginger Lee that had referred me to you. So it's just kind of funny how it all kind of loops back to you, Mark, and Tip's concerts.
Oh, it's so funny.
Yeah.
So funny. I guess I didn't realize that it had the impact it did. Being a touring musician for the last almost 20 years, I've sort of become smart to a lot of things. And one of the things that kept me alive over the years sometimes were house concerts and working with communities and doing really meaningful, oftentimes, 25 to 30 people, but
we're just going to roll. Sort of a bit of a personal question. Is Mark Addison your partner?
No.
Husband? Okay. Someone else. Okay.
Yeah, he's my writing and recording partner, or has been for a couple of different records, and we do a lot of advertising work together.
Oh, cool.
And we are partners in our House Concert series, Tips concerts. But no, we're buddies. And I put that little camper for Tips concerts on his property, and we were planning on working on another record together. So we've been friends a long time.
Cool. Yeah, I didn't know, but I saw the obvious connection. I thought, I guess they're a couple married or something. But kind of, you are a couple, but you're like work. What do you call it? What do they call it? Work spouses or?
Oh yeah. But we used to call it that whenever I lived on the property. And yeah, we did. It was fun. He's great. He's a great friend. And, but no, I'm actually married to someone else, and he's a partner as well. And he splits his time between Cleveland and Austin. His partner lives in Cleveland. So, they swap back and forth. So yeah.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. Mark and Tip's concerts has been a bit of a recurring theme on the podcast tonight. I want to say that it first came up when I had Ray Prim. He's been a performer there, yes? Do you recall?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was on the podcast.
That's so funny that our series has come onto your radar.
Oh, yeah. And believe me, if I had the bandwidth, I would have been pinging you and Mark, to say, hey, you got mentioned again on the podcast.
That's great.
Yeah, so I think Ray was the first one to bring it up. And interestingly, too, it was in that same conversation that the whole house concert thing became an interest of mine. And it has been largely, or I was going to say sheerly, but largely because of conversations I've had on the podcast, and knowing that there are surely artists that I talk to that are interested in learning more about that world. So it's just been kind of recurring. And then I know it's come up a couple of other times on the podcast, but most recently, Jana Pokop had brought up, hopefully I'm remembering all this correctly, had brought up Mark, because they worked together recently on a project of hers. So, and then, so it was Ginger Lee that had referred me to you. So it's just kind of funny how it all kind of loops back to you, Mark, and Tip's concerts.
Oh, it's so funny.
Yeah.
So funny. I guess I didn't realize that it had the impact it did. Being a touring musician for the last almost 20 years, I've sort of become smart to a lot of things. And one of the things that kept me alive over the years sometimes were house concerts and working with communities and doing really meaningful, oftentimes, 25 to 30 people, but very, very, very connected, house shows or like a rec center, some people like had condos, and they had I did a rooftop in Seattle once at these condos. And then, it doesn't have to be a traditional house concert, this is my house. But it is someone who has a space or access to a space and wants to invite their community. And I feel like to break into a new market for a songwriter, that's the most golden way to do it. Because you have relationships, you get to tell stories and play and have, a cover charge that is actually, respectable, and a whole room full of people who are there specifically to get to know you and your music. So you walk away with friendships, people who want to host the next one when you come to town, and people who want to, support your records and buy your merch. And to me, it's a no-brainer. That's the best way to break into a new market. Playing a club show, in the middle of a Tuesday night at 10 o'clock is not going to necessarily get most of our demographics out, especially when we're in a new market. So Mark and I decided when we were building, actually my now husband, Ryan, and I were building the deck for my camper, and we were like, hey, let's put a roof over this. And this deck is a perfect stage. We could just start hosting shows here and showcase the studio. It's on Mark's property. And when we can swing it and we're both available and in town, that's what we do. And because I learned so much from all the house concerts I did on the road, what worked, what didn't, I actually have created a house concert FAQ, for people who are curious to host but don't know where to start. And I used all that knowledge to sort of curate ours, and thank goodness my husband is a web designer and helped me create, proper RSVP forms. So everything has automated emails, information, and, it all kind of works. But, it's a little, sweet. It's a sweet project. Unfortunately, lately we've had tons of rain, and we've had more shows rained out than we've been able to put on. So chasing a toddler around and wondering what the weather will be like has slowed our concerts, but we'll pick it back up.
Good to hear. From what I can tell, and I mention this because you suddenly made me wonder if you are aware, or you and Mark are aware of it, but Tips Concerts is rather a marquee of house concerts.
I had no idea. I had no idea.
Yeah, I mean, in the community, the musician community, it's, I would venture to say marquee, coveted, and just highly regarded, loved.
That's so good.
Yeah. It looks very cool.
It's a great experience when the weather's right and the music is going. And Austin just happens to be home to so many amazing songwriters. And while we have some really lovely venues here, not to bash our longstanding, wonderful listening spaces, to create an experience like that for fans, it's like a little bit outside of town, under the stars, with the disco ball shining everywhere. And, it's got some magic. And when it's a great night, it's a great night. And we're so grateful to be able to call up our friends and ask them to join us. And, our mailing list just blew up over time. My mailing list for my personal brand doesn't grow that fast. So hopefully we'll put a couple shows on the books for this coming season. And we just had to slow it down a little bit due to travel and weather and the baby. And the fact that because I'm a musician, I have some of those nights I have to go, earn my paycheck somewhere else. And it's harder for Mark to host, everything. It's a lot of work. So.
Sure.
Yeah.
I bet you that there are a lot of people that would love nothing more than to volunteer on occasion, if that doesn't already happen, to help pull those off when they seem like they're going to be difficult. And this is just kind of based on what I hear people say about about
so
Tips
cool.
concerts.
You have such good feedback about our our shows.
Yeah. Where do you mentioned the FAQ? Where do you keep that? Is it's for public consumption, I presume?
It's on my website, wendycolonna.com. There's a one of the tabs up top has a drop-down menu, and I think it's like
there it is, host a house concert
or host a house concert, and then you click on that, and it has sort of a preliminary introduction, and then you can download the FAQ.
Ah, cool, very cool. Mm-hmm. I will probably check that out.
After writing that email 50 times, I realized I should probably just have a downloadable document.
I was going to mention, and possibly the most mentioned person on the podcast who's been a guest because of house concerts is a woman named Shannon Curtis, who does it. She assembles house concert tours. She doesn't really play anywhere else, with few exceptions. And she was doing the same, answering so many questions. She wrote a small book on it, which is super informative. And I think the second person who was talking about house concerts on this podcast was Tom Meany, if I'm remembering. I think he was after I had Ray Prim on here, but he mentioned Shannon Curtis, and so I waited a long while, but I got her to come on and talk about it. So that's neat that you did that as well. I look forward to checking it out. I know that it'll be something I can share with other musicians.
Yeah, well, it's such a great way for us to grow, like I said, into new markets. Because you plug into a community, you're going to get more visibility and more connection. And really, after the bottom fell out of the market of music, you've got to become creative and resourceful. And as much as, Steve Holtz just wrote a really great long Facebook rant about house concerts and why, for, it doesn't look as professional to the outside world, and booking agents like to book festivals and things like that. But it's also so lucrative and so connecting with the actual fan base. You're really trying to not just build, but keep, in the Spotify world of music distribution, it's sort of a consumption and it's fast food music. It's not that the music is not quality. It's just people, they browse around, they like something for a week and they forget about it, and they browse around, they like something for a week. So to have stickiness and, relationships with your fan base, and house concerts and, crowdfunding, that's the way for artists.
Yeah. You mentioned the person whose first name I caught, Steve, that wrote that post?
Steve Poltz, T-O-L-T-Z.
T-O-L-T-Z. And did he post that on Facebook, you said?
On Facebook, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'd like to check that out. Yeah, it's an interesting...
It's a really good one.
Sure. Interesting points that you made, and perhaps some of them came from the article, and sort of brings me full circle in some conversations I've had with a number of musicians, and with Shannon Curtis, who perhaps like you has become a resource, a giver of information about it to hosts and musicians. How it looks like you do a lot of work with Ginger Lee, or do some work with her. How do you two know one another?
Well, the Austin music community is instead of competing with one another as they do in other markets, we are all collaborators here. And I think that's one of the benefits of being a part of it. And Ginger and I have been friends since the early 2000s. She had a venue called Love, and she would put on afternoons, like sort of afternoon in the park, house concert style shows, where people would bring a blanket or a chair and snacks and whatever they want to drink, and pass around the jar, and host really good bands. She always did a South by Southwest showcase, and eventually that turned into, after the store was gone, Love It, which is a yearly charitable concert that all of us do together, who used to play at the Love store all the time. So we've been friends a long time and collaborators. We've toured Europe and the U.S. together. She's a huge weekend.
Yeah. So you toured in Europe together, and then I lost you.
Oh yeah, we've toured in Europe. We've toured all over the U.S. We've worked together on several projects. She's a really great friend. We go way back. Yeah.
That's cool. Nice lady. Talented too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I see you
so
have
many talents.
sounds like and the two of you. I'm sure I'll learn a little bit more about you after our conversation. But the two of you seem somewhat similar in that you really stretch your talents for your career and outside of your career, doing all kinds of different things and doing them quite well.
Well, thanks. We have conversations about that on the regular. How do we do this? What are we doing? How do you brand this? How do you share, your many passions? Where's the overlap? One of the things in coaching that I do, which is my most recent sort of new venture, doing life and career transition coaching, is working with clients on all those questions, and Ginger and I have that conversation often too.
That's cool. I'm just remembering when we spoke briefly, I believe it was just last Saturday, that you mentioned that, and I had forgotten. Does the coaching in any way stem from or is it connected to your music career, or somewhat separate? It sounds, when you describe it to me, it sounds pretty separate, although I know it's sort of, I assume it's part of your career ecosystem, but is there a connection?
Not exactly. I think over the years, I experienced some really pivotal moments in my career path with the help of coaches. And I've always been called to uplift and support and, feel, connected to positive action in the world. I write a lot of songs that are about the journey from darkness into light, about struggle into, clarity. A lot of the themes of my work focus around that. So I don't think that it's a unnatural segue. I try very hard to use whatever talents I have to bring out the strengths in others and see them and mirror them back, whether it's music or teaching yoga or coaching. So to me, it's all the same, just different applications.
Sure.
Of the same sort of passion or the same calling. Vocationally, I would say, music is a mirror of that human journey and that experience of moving through those challenging spots into clarifying spots, hopefully. And, music tells the story of what that looks and feels like at different stages. So being a student of the human experience as a writer of songs, I'm no stranger to compassionate listening, and I'm no stranger to going the extra mile and listening a little more deeply, considering all the outcomes, So I think the music certainly experience has lent itself to that calling. And once I started a family and my dad passed away, I just felt like it was probably a good time to step in that direction, since I wasn't going to be on the road as much. So my time was going to look different. And I was going to be more available to that sort of thing. And it's been wonderful. I have 6 or 7 clients that I work with each week, just depending on where they are. And I'm growing that slowly, and I'm doing facilitating groups for moms based on self-care, and working with a therapist friend on that. It's really awesome. And I'm no stranger to organizing people, being a concert organizer, an event producer, doing nonprofit work. So, it's all in my wheelhouse. It's just another place where I'm, building up muscles and showing up to be of service.
Sure. What kind of, you mentioned, experiences or transformations that you personally had through coaches or with the help of coaches, and can you talk a little bit about the types of coaching you've done, that you've been on the receiving end of?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I think a lot of, when you're ready for a coach, you're ready to make a change and you're ready to commit to habits. And unlike therapy, coaching is sort of about saying, here is where I am and there is where I want to go. And I've already examined the past and I'm ready to start putting one foot in front of the other, and I need support. So that being said, most of the times that I've received the help of coaches have been in life transitions. One is I went through a pretty hefty breakup with a partner who was also a part of my business and band. And I was just trying to redefine who I was and, how I was going to move forward. And had some seriously powerful aha moments and felt really supported in moving forward into, uncharted new territory through that transition. Another time I worked with a coach that was really powerful was when I was getting ready to have my son and also release an album. And she really helped me to get clear on my revenue streams and my focal points and my priorities and how they measure up, with the way, my time was being spent. And so valuable. I still carry those lessons. I'm still learning them. I'm still working with them. But what a great, set of ears and feedback that was during a huge transition in my life.
Sure.
Those two examples.
Did you, was there encouragement from anywhere, perhaps those coaches or elsewhere, other communities that pushed you in the direction of doing the coaching that you do, or something else that got you there?
Well, I think a lot of it started when I was touring. I would sometimes go to colleges and work with. A lot of times, music departments have degree programs, but they don't have anybody in the
faculty.
Degree path. Well, they're not teaching them how to apply their skills in the real world.
Sure.
So they have amazing musical skills, but they don't even know what success means when they step, over the threshold with their, diploma. They're like, okay, I've got this music degree. I have no idea what to do. I kind of know what I think success is, but it's sort of like, here's what the world is telling me success is, but what do I think? So I started working more in a speaking role, but also in workshop role with a lot and one-on-one with a lot of these music students who were getting ready to graduate and going, I don't know what I'm going to do with this degree. And so sort of debunking all the myths of what success means or looks like according to the rest of the world, and asking the crucial questions like, do you want a family? Do you want to be on the road? Do you want to be on a magazine? Do you want privacy? Do you want, what does it look like? Getting those questions out there and working with them to sort of figure out what it is and what it isn't. And I loved doing that. Mostly because I wished a long time ago somebody sat with me and did that. I felt like I was helping them create multi-year shortcuts.
Sure.
And so I felt like, oh, wow, this doesn't have to only apply to the music business. It can be for anybody who's graduating with a specific, like yoga teachers, they don't get a lot of business training and marketing or, defining success or figuring out their measurables. And so I was naturally drawn to, so you can figure out these measurable quantities of what success looks like, get really clear about them and actually set a course to achieving them and say no to the things that show up that don't reflect that back. That's cool. And so I felt like working with those musicians just fired me up so much that somewhere in my life I would get certified and start, working with other people as well.
That's very cool. You mentioned the common myths of success in the student musician world. I don't know what time frame we were talking about, but can you share a couple of or a few of those myths, and do they still apply right now? The myths for success.
I think it's that, sort of top percentage of visible artists at that moment, who are on the cover of magazines or, trending on Spotify or,
sure,
have a good YouTube cult following or, whatever it is, like, I want to be big. I want to have it all. I want to tour. I want to be trending here. I want to do this. I want to do that. And, they really didn't, necessarily think through all the other ways you can make a respectable living with music.
Mm-hmm.
Or, it was either like, I'm going to quote unquote fail, or I'm going to hit the stars. And there was nothing in between. And experience has told me the opposite. I've worked in so many different capacities in this business. I mean, I've written for K-pop as a side job. I've done a church musician, music directing for a spell. When I was working on a record, I just hunkered down and did that because it was a great experience of like really, working through material fast and, getting my chops up, and also, being able to root down for a minute and not be on the road. I've done commercial writing for Coca-Cola and Quaker, and I'm writing some tracks specifically only for licensing right now, working on some of those, and everything in between. So there's so many different ways to be maybe not Billboard charting musician, but have a good revenue stream that covers your needs and maybe even your families if you're lucky.
Yeah. I was going to ask you about commercial work, but of those several areas, less thought of areas perhaps that you mentioned, which of them, or does one of them stand out as one where you've had more success than the others?
Oh, well, great question. I didn't realize that I would love writing for advertising so much. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But it's like haiku. It's like you have to write an entire song with a narrative and a theme and a real human element, because now they all want a song that doesn't sound like jingle, but mm-hmm. It feels like a real song. So when you write for advertising, all these briefs are like trying to make you write a song, like a song based on the human experience and all the feelings. And they'll sometimes send you a paper brief or a video that it has to go with. And like, for me, that's like an amazing puzzle, like to take all the variables that say, do this, don't do that, do this, don't do that. This is the type of instrumentation. This is the words to stay away. These are the words to stay away from. This is, it has to all be done in 1 minute or 30 seconds or both. Here, give me a 30-second version and a 1 minute version. I loved that so much that, I jump on every single offer that comes my way for that. And my first one was this huge ad for Coca-Cola. It was everywhere.
And was that one was somewhat recent?
It was in 2014.
Okay.
Yeah. And since then, I've written a whole bunch. And Southwest Louisiana, which is where I'm from, they hired me to do a full-length song for the Visitors Bureau. This beautiful video that they put together, showcasing the beauty of that area. That was awesome. Some are close to home. Some are just like super crazy advertising puzzles. The ones that I'm working on right now are licensing company reached out and they just want a specific sound that's trending, but a female version of it. So that's just also really fascinating to me, like going in and studying all that. I love it so much. And I one might think, oh, that's selling out or that's, not being an artist. But to me, that's like the ultimate artistry is like taking what you do well and then giving somebody else a gift of, what they're looking for with that thing.
Yeah. Well, not that you're seeking validation here in our conversation, but I was reminded there is an artist named Liz Chirelli, I think I'm saying her name right, who was in one of my early episodes, and she has done soundtrack work, and the way she described her excitement is similar to what you just described in putting together the puzzle. She really enjoys that process. And maybe, when she did her first, if I'm remembering right, when she did her first such project, it was just very different from what she'd done in the past, and she fell in love with it. And more recently, I met a gentleman named Lance Harville, who has worked with Rex Brown, who formerly played in Pantera and was a schoolmate of mine, but Lance spends his career in his home studio publishing stuff that most of us can't buy because it lives in the licensing world for television and film. Mm-hmm. And he seems to like it a lot. I suspect in the latter example, though, he's a guy that also finds some joy in playing out, and he doesn't do that a lot, but he gets those outlets once in a while too. But that's very cool. Mm-hmm. And was the Coca-Cola opportunity kind of fortuitous, or was it something that you were seeking out and it finally happened?
Those are always like mysteries, right? I had been, because you never know where your years and years of hard work and relationship building and your talent will intersect and create an opportunity, and then have that opportunity actually come to life. So many advertising things that they'll pay for a full demo and then they'll decide to do a VO with,
they won't use it.
Yeah. Sure. So many. So I imagine there are tons of me's out there doing tons of demo work for these clients and none of the work sees the light of day, and those ads end up being like a little electronic canned piece.
But you got paid, right?
Well, you don't get paid like the big bucks, but sure, you get a demo fee. But the experience is always good. It's educational, and you get better and better as it goes. I don't know. I feel like I had a relationship with that particular licensing company, and they were always looking for the right opportunities for me, mm-hmm, working on placements with my existing catalog. And I think this happens a lot. You kind of show that you have all these muscles. And for me as an artist, my catalog is pretty diverse. Every record I make has a totally different vibe to it. So where one person might be, celebrated for having sameness and continuity through all their releases, one might find that something to criticize with me, but it's only something to criticize if you're looking at it one way. Like if you're looking at it from a fan perspective who's like really only married to a certain style from their favorite artist. But if you look at it from a licensing perspective, I have a really diverse set of offerings because some of my stuff is like, 1960s style, Al Green pop from, the R&B world back then, or, more modern stuff, which I've done lately with a little bit more fuzz and grit, and so it's a diverse catalog. But that company thought my catalog was great for that reason. They could pitch it to a lot of different things because there was so many different types of sounds in it, and they eventually saw my strengths as a writer and started pitching me for that, and that was my first big break. And I wrote that song on my ukulele at my manager's house, played the demo into my computer because I had like a half hour before the deadline. And they wanted that particular song. So a few edits later, it's all over the friggin' country.
That's great.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so it sounds like there was no big inflection point, if I can use that phrase, but that it was a lot of little things that led up to, and including, I guess, a relationship with the folks that maintain the catalog, and then the opportunity presented itself. Yeah.
I think that's how it hits for everybody. You put all the hard work in, you build all the relationships, and you trust that somewhere the right thing is going to break.
You're probably right too. And I've heard it. I can think of one other conversation I've had on the podcast where someone described to me how it started for them. They do a lot of licensing work and, and still performing, having a good time. But I think, probably it, when an artist reflects on how it happened in their head, it may vary, but surely it is exactly what you just said. It's a lot, or what we were just talking about. A lot of little things happen. You put in the hard work, and there are the opportunities. That's very cool. And of those areas that you mentioned, the lesser known ways of making a living, is there one that stands out as, I wouldn't mind doing that a little bit more, but it just hasn't happened yet, or have you already achieved that in what you just talked about?
Oh, I would love to do more and more custom writing. It's fun. It's good paying. It stretches you as an artist. So it does all the things that, it builds up new muscles as an artist. So to me, that's really attractive. Pushes you past your comfort point. When you're an artist and you're kind of writing about your life or, your friends' lives, it's sort of limiting, and when you're, when you're asked to do that sort of custom work, whether it's for advertisement or a pitch piece for a culture, like that cultural piece I did for Southwest Louisiana, you have to really just step out of yourself and totally absorb a new narrative and stretch your musical things, learn about different melodic patterns and production styles. And, I love that. It's, to me, 20 years of being a singer-songwriter on the road and touring a lot acoustic, it's sort of limited. And you can become a better storyteller. And my band is tight and our harmonies are great and we're always growing, but like doing that kind of stuff is so fun. To me, that's like just amazing. Fun. It pays way better than, living gig to gig. And it really stretches you. And I think it informs my work. I think that when I do a lot of writing for ads, I have new muscles to lend to my new work. I understand what people want in a different way.
That is very, very cool. Thanks for describing that. Man, we're just about buzzed through our hour here. I should ask you, I also wanted to ask you about your discography. When I glanced, before I get into that, I want to ask you, as I go explore your work some more, just to take me to a quick point that I'm interested in. Do you have an album that's kind of, you would consider your more rocking sounding album?
Probably my most recent one.
Okay.
No moment but now.
Cool. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just started, I'm pretty sure I checked that out when I first got in touch with you, and I started listening to it again today, so I will just continue there. Your discography, when I look at it, this is just on Spotify. It looks like a 2011 to 2017 affair. But I know you've been playing for a while, as you've mentioned, and your bio talks about releasing music since 2000. Is there other work available for the public that they can find, or?
Yeah, so my first record is not available to the public unless you're like a patron and you get it on your exclusive Jump Drive, which I sell through my website.
That's your first record you're talking about?
Discography. Yeah, well, it has the whole discography plus radio interviews and live performances. It's sort of the commercial catalog plus the non-commercial, some of the non-commercial catalogs. So that's what the thumb drive is, and it includes my first record, which was on a label and released on a label in 2000. The next record I made was called Red. It was 2002 or 3.
Yeah, 3. I apologize. So I know what happened is, for whatever reason, when I look on Spotify, your albums, they're not in chronological order. And I always, unless they changed something, which they certainly could have recently, I always thought I was looking at stuff. In fact, I'm sure at one time I was looking at things in chronological order. And now I'm clicking into all of them going, oh. So, because I just went to what looked like the first one, and it was 2011.
Yeah. The Lazy Bones one?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
So Red
EP
was...
that we recorded in Belgium.
Yeah, so Red goes back to the beginning almost, or is there one probably here before that?
Yeah. That's the one that is the oldest available online like that. Red, then Right Where I Belong. Then We Are One. Then Old New Borrowed and Blue. Oh, maybe Old New Borrowed and Blue, the live album, comes between those two.
Oh, I'll have to check that
one. We Are One, 2010. Then 2011, the Lazy Bones record.
Yep.
2014, Nectar. And 2017, No Moment But Now. Is that right?
Ooh, how can you keep it straight? There's a lot of stuff here.
There's so many records and a couple singles in between.
So who or what is Lazy Bones, and how did you find yourself doing the project in Belgium?
It's a fun story. I went to Belgium for a solo tour, and on the first night I was there, my friend and our tour manager, who helped me set up the tour, said, I invited some musicians over to do a jam with you and play with them. Maybe they could sit in here or there. And I was like, oh gosh, a jam. This sounds terrible.
Right?
It was like not in my wheelhouse.
Well, it probably was, but not something you wanted to do necessarily, right?
Yeah. Well, and they all came over. Two were harmonica players. One was a singer in this really great swing and jazz type band. And the other was this gypsy jazz western swing guitar player who also played with the gal. I was just the other vocalist. And they all came over, and I just kind of played through some songs, and they played along, and it was really fun. One would switch playing percussion, and the other would play the harmonica of the two harmonica players. And I was like, well, you guys can join me for any gigs. This is fun. And they basically almost all of them joined me for almost all the gigs on the tour. And the eve of my 34th birthday or something, we all went into the studio after about 6 or 7 dates of playing together, and we cut a 7-song EP.
That's great.
And the next night was my birthday, so we had a big gig and party, and then the next night we mixed and mastered it, and then we set up shop in my promoter's living room, and his daughter is a graphic designer, a good friend of mine, and we made a little sweatshop assembly line and put together the records and sold enough records to cover the cost of the album by the end of that tour.
That's amazing.
Which was remarkable. Nobody ever recouped, with 5 gigs, but
that's amazing.
It sounds good too. That's the crazy thing is it doesn't sound like a low budget, crazy, on the fly sort of project. It sounds great. And it really showcases all of their unique talent and shows a side of me that isn't on any of the rest of my records. So it was such a beautiful experience. And we did a little more touring together over the next few years. I hope to see them again soon sometime.
What a great
project.
And what a great story. This afternoon when I was revisiting your catalog, that was the first thing I listened to. And now when you tell the story of putting it together, I would have never guessed it was put together in such a rapid fashion. It sounds really great. So
yeah, it really just worked. We just had a chemistry between us, and it worked. It worked really well.
I was kind of laughing as soon as you got to there were 2 harmonica players, and because I'm sitting here thinking, okay, right. First of all, you were already apprehensive about a jam, and then 2 harp players walk in. But hey, one of them plays percussion, or both of them. That's cool. They sound great.
It was really funny over time because we ended up over the next year or two, whenever we would get together, there were a couple other musicians, songwriters who also played harmonica. And we did a couple of tours where, they were a part of it here or there. And there's a point in the show, where, of course, they also played guitar and stuff. So there's a point in the show, though, a couple of gigs where all 4 harmonica players, I would just do a song where me and the other guitar player would play, and then they would just pass around, and it was like, that felt really remarkable for just like one song in the set, just to have like, oh, and then this guy's going to pull one out of his pocket, and then this guy's going to pull one out of his pocket. And
wow,
that was fun and funny. You know, it had a entertainment quality to it. We didn't abuse it though.
Spinal Tap of harmonicas.
Oh my gosh.
That's funny. That's very funny.
Yeah.
How do you feel about yourself after all this time doing music? How do you feel about the marketing aspect of what you do? And I ask it in kind of like, how do you rate that part of the machine that is your career? and or, you know, you feel like there's that much growth potential? Do you have it figured out? What are you still learning?
Yeah, so marketing yourself is always a really weird thing, right? And especially in the world of selfies and narcissism. How do you come off as authentic, especially as an artist? You know, like how does that work?
Plus, you're a recovering yogi, right?
I mean,
I'm just kidding.
I mean, yeah. I mean, it's like so hard to nail it down. Like, what is the right amount of so at the beginning of my career, I was real punk rock about stuff. I mean, I was a folk singer, but I had a real punk rock background, and everything felt like selling out if it wasn't DIY, and everything felt really out of integrity if it wasn't, you know, if it wasn't like totally indie and punk rock, you know. So I've come a long way since then with my relationship with marketing, but I do still feel, I feel like my greatest challenge was marketing over the years, and quite possibly one of my biggest blocks in, you know, growth as an artist, because I shied away from it, hid behind other artists, you know, did a lot of things to avoid marketing myself just because it felt really icky. But at a certain point, I realized that sort of the fan response was, your music is important. It's gotten me through really hard times. You know, this is sort of like the message that has continually come into my life when marketing was the thing that I was struggling with, is your music is important. It serves a big purpose in my life. You may not be the top of the charts, but your music got me through this period, or your music was the soundtrack of our romance and we got married, or your music helped me, you know, through a divorce, or, you know, losing a parent or a sibling, or, you know, your music was the thing that helped me through med school, or, you know, whatever it was. There were so many messages throughout that just kept echoing back to me. Like, it was medicine, it was important, it was good. And so it made me really aware that I needed to keep doing it, and that I needed to figure out a way how to reach the people like that who were touched by it, and just say screw it about the rest. And so it gave me the courage to start marketing in a more authentic way and feel real good about it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and going back to something that you said, about it always felt icky, and I think, for a lot of us, that when you're trying to figure it out and you're having missteps, be they very small or maybe kind of big, that it can feel icky. But as you start to figure it out and can be yourself, and perhaps get the feedback that you were, certainly helps. That certainly helps. That about the importance of what you were doing.
Knowing your target market, and not trying to be somebody to the wrong people,
or too many,
the people
right?
who you are. Yeah, not trying to be everybody to everything to everyone, and also understanding that there are, it may not be a specific demographic, but there are a population of people out there that are hungry for and appreciative of and grateful for the work you do. So reach out to them. And when you're speaking in your marketing, imagine you're speaking to those exact people. And remember that is who you're speaking to. And if the people who aren't supposed to be buying your music or coming to your shows, if that doesn't work for them, then those aren't your people. And that's okay. Those are somebody else's people. And there's enough music fans out there for everybody to have their people. If you have a boutique audience of 2,000 really committed fans, that's true success for a lot of people. And if you have, 100,000 to 50 million sort of fly-by-night fans, is that successful? Like when you look at the sort of consume and spit out Spotify marketing, do any of those people have a memorable, sticky relationship? I mean, are they impacting lives? And if you are impacting lives, then keep at it and remember that those few people that you are impacting are the ones that matter when you're marketing. So that's sort of the way I take it now.
Yeah, those are great messages, and reminds me of one message that has resonated with me, which is along the same lines, and that is that someone is always going to like you best. Don't worry about everyone else. There are going to be people out there that definitely like you best, and those are the ones you want to try to serve and focus on. Anyway,
right.
Great. That's great stuff.
If you're a doctor, you don't. If you're a doctor who's really great at doing knee surgeries, then why would you try to market to the gynecology market? It's like, talk about the thing you're passionate about. Work with those people. Let them know that you're there for them. Just same thing with music market. I don't understand sometimes now on the other side of it how we miss that. That it's okay, to really be connected to the people we serve. I'm not. It's one of the reasons why I really enjoy working as a mentor and as a coach with artists sometimes, is to help them give themselves permission. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Important. Okay. We're at the hour. Let me know if I have this right, but anyone listening who wants to know more about you and find out everything Wendy Colonna can go to wendycolonna.com. Did I say your last name correctly?
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, and it's Wendy, the traditional spelling, and Colonna is COLONNA.com. And everything's there except, I think, Instagram, but you're also Wendy Colonna on Instagram.
I am.
So they can find you everywhere that way. And if one wants to get on the email list for Tips Concerts, I guess it's just as easy as going to tipsconcerts.com.
Tipsconcerts.com. Mm-hmm.
Cool. I think I do some drive-bys through Austin from time to time, and I think I'm going to put this on my bucket list and and sign up so I know what's happening.
Be our guest. Yeah, please.
That would be amazing. And one last note. I have reached out to Mark recently because his name came up from Janet Pokop. If you happen to see him, and if my email perhaps got lost in his inbox, let him know I'm looking for him.
All right. I'll talk to him soon, and I will remind him to check in with you. Wendy,
thank you so much for spending time with me today, and thank you for a second chance. For those of you listening, I was supposed to do this a few days ago and missed the opportunity through my own absent-mindedness, but Wendy was kind enough to give me a second chance, and I really appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for having me. It's been a cool conversation. Thanks for doing the work that you do with artists, too. So great.
The pleasure is all mine. I'll talk to you very soon.
All right. Thanks.
When the
Hey, thanks for listening. Question for you. Are you struggling to move your music journey forward? I can help. If not personally, then by referring you to the next best available resources. Schedule a free 15-minute call with me to find out if I can indeed help you. It's easy. Just visit unstarvingmusician.com/coaching to schedule your call today. Look for links to just about everything covered in this episode in the show notes at unstarvingmusician.com/podcast. This episode was powered by the Unstarving Musician's Guide to Getting Paid Gigs, how to get booked and paid what you're worth over and over again. It's available on paperback, Kindle, and ebooks just about everywhere you can find them. It's also available as a standalone podcast called the Unstarving Musician's Guide podcast. You can learn more about the book and companion podcast at unstarvingmusician.com/book. I'd love it if you picked up a copy and would love it even more if you left a review. With much gratitude, peace, love, and more cowbell.